Emily, how's your bubbly?
Delicious. Grapefruit's my favorite flavor.
Rank right now your top 5 favorite bubbly waters. Grapefruit's number 1.
Grapefruit, blackberry, lime, lemon. Nope. Grapefruit, blackberry, tangerine, lime, orange. I'm very into citrus.
What would be, like, what's the flavor you've had that you're like, this could never be put in rotation ever again and the world would be okay?
It's a really good question.
Or are you just like pretty, like there's nothing that tastes like sweaty butt to you?
Okay, this is actually the hottest take ever. Dustin just said our last episode had no hot takes. This is going to be a hot take. The LaCroix flavor limoncello. Gross.
Okay.
I think it tastes like lemon cake, and I don't want to drink cake. I don't want to drink bubbly cake. And everyone's obsessed with it, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Embrace the journey. That's funny.
Have you ever had it?
No, it sounds gross. I mean,
But everyone is like, this is the only flavor I like. And I'm like, shut up.
Shut your unnecessary ass up!
I will say when I moved to Missouri, no one drinks flavored water, like bubbly water, like Midwesterners. Like, I don't know a single person that drank LaCroix, that drank like any of this stuff growing up. And I move here and they hand it to me like, hey, try this. I'm like, this tastes like ass. And now 7 years later, that's all I drink. So I love it.
So you didn't used to like it?
I hated it. I thought it tasted like sweaty boxers that were like wrung out and then carbonated.
This is what I heard is someone said, so actually I didn't like it at first at all either, but my mom was like determined to like it and she bought a 12-pack of grapefruit LaCroix. Tried one sip and was like, this is the worst thing I've ever had. I'm never having any other ones. And I said, Mom, I will drink the other 11 for you because I'm a good daughter. And so the first like 7, I was like, oh, this is brutal. And then I was like, this isn't bad.
Yeah. And then by 12, you're like, this is great.
I was like, buy more.
Yeah. Oh, there's a sermon in there somewhere.
I did the same thing with tea. Like there's just a lot where you just have to like work up to liking it.
Yeah. You did the same thing with progressive Christianity.
You do like, well, actually I think it's to me it's an image of liturgy, or in a sense of any sort of ritual that like makes you, like, if you don't believe it or feel it, do it until you feel it. Because I think sometimes our rituals will affect our feelings, and not just, we can't just wait for our feelings to then affect our rituals.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, random little snippet from Emily.
On a divergent note, you have a topic for us from a TV show we both watched.
TV show we both watched. I want to talk about Shiny Happy People.
Yeah.
It's I feel like it's kind of a pretty big cultural phenomenon right now,
Yeah.
or
The
maybe just
secret-
in the evangelical circles.
Maybe. And for those that didn't watch, it's a sequel to Pretty Little Liars.
That wasn't that funny.
I thought it was kind of
It was a
funny.
little shocking.
Yeah.
It was like shockingly not funny that I laughed. Sorry, that was really rude.
Do you not get those vibes? When
Shiny
you say
Happy
it?
People, Pretty Little Liars. I get it.
I think of it every time someone says it. I'm like, I have to shift out of thinking it's Pretty Little Liars every time.
Did you ever watch Pretty Little
No,
Liars?
but I hear about it, and it's what pops into my
hear
head. I
about
couldn't
it.
even tell you what it's about.
Everyone talks to me about Pretty Little
Is it
Liars
about
all day.
a religious cult?
Pretty Little Liars?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Mm.
I only watched the first episode.
Mm.
Anyway, Shiny Happy People. I feel like I heard about it, and then everyone was like, oh my God, everyone's watching it. And I was like, well, I want to be a part of the conversation.
The zeitgeist.
The cultural zeitgeist. Maybe it's saying, it's redundant to say cultural zeitgeist.
You said cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm talking to myself. Okay, Shiny Happy People. What were your original takes?
Yeah, so Annie and I started watching it, and
Of course, Annie's being brought up again.
Ugh,
She
yeah.
made it through last episode.
She made it through.
Proud of her.
She made it through. So we started watching it, and we've started a lot of like religious documentary type things, micro series, whatever, and they're usually really boring. And this one, like, gripped us pretty quick.
Okay.
And partially because it's the Duggars, right? Like
Yes.
they're like kind of a cultural phenomenon that she knew way more about than I did. So I don't know if I missed the boat or what that was about, but I like didn't have as much remembrance of them. I actually confused them with John and Kate +8.
You done lost your damn mind.
I think that's
Yeah,
what,
you did. You were like, why did people care about what she has to say or
Yeah,
something?
I
We
thought
were
that's
like,
who
what
they
in
were.
the world? Yeah.
and so these were not those people. Very different, and it was really interesting. And like, so I want to hear your thoughts too. But what I thought that was the most interesting about it was how not like extreme the belief system was that they were like occupying. Like it's like mainstream fundamentalism.
Yeah.
And there are people I'm watching on TikTok right now, like more conservative fundamentalist people that are like distancing themselves from it, like making a point to talk about it because I think that their beliefs are pretty connected. And obviously, and what's the guy's name? The IBLP guy?
Bill Gothard.
Bill Gothard. So like
Nailed
he is
it.
like, so there's a lot of wackadoodle stuff about this.
Right.
But if you stumbled across their website or were like this family or a lot of the people that are maybe more peripherally involved, it just kind of seems like evangelical fundamentalism with just have a lot of kids to take over the world.
Mm-hmm. A quiverful.
Yeah, like woven into it.
Yeah.
So what did you think about it?
Yeah, I grew up loving the Duggars. I was a big Duggar girl. My friends and I could all recite all the names. I don't think I could anymore. Do you want me to try?
Yeah.
Josh, Jana, Jill, Jessa, Ginger, Joanna. I think
I can't
I'm
fact
missing
check you on these, so you could be saying
Right.
anything you want right now.
Jedediah, Jeremiah, Jason, James, Justin, Jackson, Johanna. That's all I got.
There it is.
That was some of them.
But you were invested as like growing up. You're like, these people rock.
See, that's what's interesting is I don't think that's fascinating because I don't think I was ever like, these people get it more than anyone else gets it. Like that wasn't it. It was kind of like funny to watch. Like but we didn't make fun of them. But we didn't respect everything they thought.
Yeah. So stop me real quick. So I like my watching of the documentary was my real introduction to the show because I never watched it. But how much of it is you watched it and how old were you? Like just like kid?
Middle school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like how much of their religious convictions and that overtone resonated with you? Because from what it was projected from the documentary, it's like that was a big part of it, or at least they continue to talk about it like our ministry. But how much of that came through as a viewer on a weekly basis? So I think
that right there is what I would say. I would say like a lot of their convictions, my friends and I didn't agree with. Like we didn't think you needed a court. We didn't think you needed to wear long skirts, like all that stuff. However, I do think, so one, it was kind of fascinating. It was kind of the like young fundamentalist girls first like religious cult documentary. Like you're like into like, oh, this is different and crazy, and then you realize it's like not that different later on. But I think I did appreciate back then. I was like, it is cool that they're being really open about their faith, like
and
on
clinging
TV
to it, right?
And clinging to it. But I was also like, they go a little overboard. Like who needs chaperones and all that, and so we kind of like I guess laughed about that. Like they can only side hug. Isn't that so ridiculous? Like it's so interesting because we loved them, but we watched them to make fun of them.
Okay.
That's fascinating.
Were you team side hug and like A-frame hug? Did you guys practice that? Like ass out, like you keep your genitals far away when you hug?
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, the A-frame.
But side hug was a pretty big thing of like, it was pretty inappropriate to like full hug men.
And like for you growing up.
Yeah, I mean that was just like well, that could cause them to stumble because like they would like feel your boobs. I don't know. Is that too graphic?
No, it's just the things that like there are times, I don't know if you always like resonate with this. You say things sometimes I'm like, I cannot believe that was a part of your upbringing. Like that people, because I don't hear that being like exaggeration. I hear people being like, Emily, if you hug David, your boobs are going to tempt him to fall. Like that seems like an interesting thing, which has to create. There's no wonder you have a shame lens on the world. Like your existence caused people to stumble.
Right. And that was like, I mean, that's purity culture in general, which we've like already gotten into a little bit, but like definitely, there definitely was a level of, we definitely, like, we could hold hands before marriage. Like, we didn't have to have a chaperone, although it was, like, pretty wise so that you would, like, stay above reproach. It is really interesting the more I'm talking about it. I'm like, it's not that different. I think we just were a little more, like, it's not as big of a deal.
But you still did it.
Sometimes.
You just weren't, like, as...
Or the principle stayed. Like, there wasn't... I never, like, went on a date and my sibling had to, like, come as a chaperone, which is very typical in the Duggar family. That never happened to me. But it was often like, okay, it's not super wise to hang out just the two of you alone, because then you don't have accountability.
Did you date in high school?
I did not.
Did you have friends that dated in high school?
Yeah.
So say you have friends, David and Jessica.
Yeah. They
go on a date. Would it have been normative for like them to go on double dates, or like have the idea that them being just solo could be problematic? Because I think about like the idea of my high school girlfriend and I.
Yeah.
Like, we were never like, we should bring along Ian,
right,
just to make sure nothing happens,
keep us honest.
Yeah, like, but was that pretty common? And you were at a Christian school, so like that
True.
creates a different level. I was at a sinful public school, so I mean,
that's
it was
clearly.
I
don't know. I don't want to exaggerate at all. I think in general it was more like try to do dates in public places, or like don't be like alone in each other's rooms. Like, it was just like, don't be alone by yourself, because like that's when temptation hits. Mm-hmm. So it was like, do things in public, maybe do things with friends. It was definitely encouraged, like date in community, which isn't like a bad thing necessarily, but like to get community's input. But it was also like always doing things with community, like then you guys don't get a chance to like get to know each other.
Which, as an aside, I will say I've watched couples that did that and have huge marital problems because they never got to know each other individually. Like, and when I went to Christian college, I took a step back in freedom. Like, I lost freedom that I had in high school with the people I was dating. Like, I went to like college and it was like, you couldn't have anyone of the opposite gender in your dorm past certain hours. Mm-hmm. Doors of your room could never be shut. If someone was in your room of the opposite sex, we had a 4 on the floor rule. Yep. Like, they're always, and in our signed covenant that we had signed every year, you could not recline with a woman or someone. And I was like, what does that even mean? That's pretty typical. My friends are like, we stay upright because otherwise, like, that will be temptation. I just think it's hilarious wording, like to be like, do not recline with someone of the opposite sex.
It is weird, but I think it's so interesting talking about it, because I think we would have said like, well, we're not that crazy, when in reality it almost gave us something to look at, so we didn't have to look at ourselves and our own.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And our own like maybe issues or things that we never looked on ourselves and we're like, maybe it's ridiculous that we have these rules. We were just like, at least we're not that.
Yeah, and you were like the Coke Zero to their Coke of those rules, like
yeah, Coke Zero.
Yeah, Coke Zero, the best of all Cokes.
The best of all Cokes.
Yeah.
The best of all sodas?
I would argue.
Okay. I'm a big zero sugar soda gal.
Yeah, I don't love soda. Fun. Like, you can get rid of all soda except for Coke Zero, and I would be okay.
I really respect that, Danny. I didn't know that about you, and that just, my respect just, woo.
Yeah, I actually have regular Coke. Diet Coke is absolute garbage. Mm-hmm. It's one of the worst things ever, and Pepsi is made from the piss of Satan, and so it's
okay,
awful.
That's really random.
But
I think Pepsi's fine.
My kids like root beer, Dr. Pepper. I think those are disgusting. Sprite, I'll put up with, but Coke Zero is the only one.
I just see Danny being like, have a can of Sprite and be like, I guess I'll put up with it. Like, chug it down. Yeah.
It's the crossover.
Anyway, the Duggars.
The Duggars, yeah.
But like, I remember I got a book by some of the Duggar girls for Christmas one year, and I never read it because I was like, I don't really like need to know what they think about the world. I didn't
know Jim Bob let them learn how to read and write.
One of the craziest things, I don't think this was in the documentary, but when they would date, they had to text in a group chat with Jim Bob and Michelle.
Oh.
Can you imagine?
I cannot imagine.
I cannot imagine. Like and they would sometimes like interject. Like Jim Bob would be like, interesting point, Derek. Like, which you can totally see, but it's just like, that was one for me. I was like, you have to have some level of privacy, right?
Yeah. I will say that sounds wildly crazy. I think it would be really funny to put Annie's parents or my parents on her and I's message and just see them interact with us. Have like Roger, my father, and be like, I think that's a really good idea.
But you guys just like do your normal, like, where the hell are you?
Yeah.
Like, just like, what?
Oh, that's really funny.
Anyway, so just things like that. It is really interesting to think about how maybe not that different it was. But we did like the girls, and we were like interested in their lives. Like it is reality TV, and it kind of was like a story to watch, and it was interesting and different. All that to say, I was pretty into the Duggars, and then when like Jill and Jessa had their spinoff, I was like, cool. But then like I remember when things with like Josh originally came out, we were all like shook. All my Duggar friends and I were just like, whoa.
Can you believe it?
We couldn't believe it because we thought they were just this like super wholesome, pure, perfect family. And obviously like that was very naive of us, but to be fair, we were like 13, you know?
Right.
And so I think after that, I'm trying to think, after that we were still like really invested in the girls, but like then I kind of just stopped thinking about them until this documentary. And one thing that I just like really want to talk about, this is kind of different, and we can go back to the actual documentary, but I thought it was very, very interesting and telling that only one Duggar was willing to be interviewed.
Yeah, so I thought the entire time, like, oh, I can't wait to meet the other ones. Or I can't wait to see this. And that's something Annie and I talked a little about, is like, very courageous of this person, Jill, to come out and do that. Though you have to wonder a couple of different things. One, you could be on the Duggar side and be like, well, this person's just like, they want their money and they're doing this for a money grab. Like,
well, they never got paid, so.
Yeah, right. So, but you can make that argument. And I'm sure that is the narrative that's being spun in the Duggars family group chat with the people their kids are dating. And I imagine that's what they're talking about.
Yep.
But on the other side, I was like waiting for these other people to come up. And it's like, how is it that they're like so brainwashed? Is it they're like, we've moved so far down this train, we can't come out? Like, I was just like objectively watching. I was like, this is wild. There's nothing about this that seems normal and healthy. And the two, it was Jill and Derek, like they seem relatively functional. Yeah. Right. And I was like, and they're interesting. You can see that like they're people that came out of like a pretty sheltered life as like they're having conversations. But yeah, it made me wonder like, what's the situation and why? Like, I get why Jim Bob and his wife wouldn't comment. Like, he still has aspirations for the White House, right? Like, he's trying to do his thing. But the other kids, I was like, the youngest ones, Annie and I were like, they have no, like, they're team parents, right? They have to be. Everything that's happened, the rise and the fall is moot to them. Yeah. But the older ones, I was like, there can't just be one person that's speaking out about this. But there was.
But I mean, I believe it. And I will say there's another kid, Ginger, who wrote a book called like Finally Free or something, or like Free Indeed.
This is a Duggar.
It is a Duggar. Okay. She's like 2 sisters younger than Jill. Okay. And she basically wrote a book. I have not read it, so I'm just going to kind of guess what. I mean, I kind of know what it's about. This is a recommendation station, so. It's not. But she basically wrote about like coming out of IBLP, which is the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which is kind of the religion or cult or sect that Jim, Bob, and Michelle were like all in for. And so she basically writes about coming out of the IBLP into like mainstream evangelicalism. Yeah. Which is super interesting. And so I was kind of surprised, kind of not surprised that she wasn't in it, because she now like has colored her hair and she wears pants. You know.
But is still a conservative evangelical.
Yeah. Right? And so she would say like there was a lot of legalism in how I grew up, and then I found the true gospel. Yeah. I don't know where like Jill and Derek are today, but I just really wanted to unpack that because I think it says a lot that not a lot of kids spoke out. And I think there's twofold probably. One, Jill and Derek were very clear that they basically have no relationship with Jim and Bob and Michelle at this point. Yeah. So I think that there is totally just like a cost of relationship, and that's really, really hard. Right. I think also it probably is hard to like mentally get out of that belief system. Or then I think there's a jump of like getting out of it. I think maybe that was like Ginger's jump a little bit. But then there's another jump of being willing to like publicly criticize. Yeah. And I like relate to that jump. Like that's like I was thinking about Jill and I was like, girl, obviously not the same at all. But like, no, I mean, maybe a little similarities, but like my story's not her story, but I just like was thinking about her, I was like, yeah, like this took a lot of guts, and I'm sure she got so much lash
yeah, well, I like
backlash.
It's the thing I think about in terms of like leaving anything, right?
Yeah.
Like the cost that's comes with that is oftentimes more than anyone's interested in paying. And so you think about the things people put up with in terms of marriages, in terms of their faith, in terms of like the community, whatever they like, people put up with a lot of stuff because the cost of exiting feels too high. And it sounds a little bit like maybe the majority of the Duggars, it's like they have anecdotal evidence of what happens watching people leave, like get completely cut off. But they also have, I don't know about Ginger, the other one, like is she still connected even though she's deconstructed out of IBLP into conservative evangelicalism? Like how connected is she?
I think she's like probably put up some boundaries, but like I think she's more connected and more accepted than maybe Jill and Derek.
Yeah. So the whole thing is interesting to me because it's hard. It's proof that it's hard to get out of that kind of lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be the IBLP ecosystem. Like any sort of controlling dogmatic system that's like based in shared beliefs, and anyone outside of that is going to be a threat to it. Yeah. You're going to make it really hard for people to leave. You're going to make it really, really unappealing for people to leave. And if they ever do get up the courage or the whatever to leave, once they do, you're going to, I don't know if make their life a living hell, but you're going to show them the error of their ways by leaving. And so I think you look at it from that regard, it's probably just in a vacuum that is not dissimilar than a lot of people in the deconstruction journey. You probably feel that, right?
100%. And I think in general, like, I guess I will just say when I watched it expecting to be like, wow, that's so crazy. Like, I can't imagine. And I like watched it and was like, oh no, like I can imagine a lot of this. Like, this isn't completely unrelatable. Kind of like even what you were saying of like, okay, but there were some similarities. Yeah. It was interesting.
Well, like if you look at like, so there's a lot of things in it, and I don't know their doctrine inside and out, right? But
I don't either.
Like they have this idea, the quiver full, like this idea, have a lot of kids. That's pretty unique to them. But also like Mormons do that, and like Catholics like to have kids, and like there's a lot of like other things. But the way they did it was like very them centric to like get in. It sounds like, and you got to understand too, it's like there's a bent on this documentary. It is not pro. Of course. So you have to be honest with yourself and be like, this is not speaking highly of them, right? But like they're trying to create a lot of kids for prominent places of government to like their lifestyle, their way, right? So that's an interesting side of it. But like the umbrellas of leadership, like there's God, man, household, right? Like woman, kids. That's your upbringing, like, right?
I mean for sure.
That's conservative evangelicalism. Like that's
I've seen those umbrellas. Like that wasn't crazy.
Right. And so there's parts of it like that are not crazy. The idea of like homeschooling, like I started to wonder of like how many of our homeschool friends or kids that I knew, like how many of them in just conservative evangelical worlds, that's what they were consuming. Because this sounds like it was the premier Christian like homeschool curriculum. And
but it wasn't even like school.
But it was, though, for a lot of like the way, and this might just be how I watched it. I think that was homeschool. Like that was a curriculum for kids. And so like if you're a conservative fundamentalist Christian family, like we just watched, what did we watch? It was like this, it's a new home makeover thing on Netflix. Oh. And it's called Hack My House. And so it's like takes small houses and like creates like space hacks, like and so one of them was this family that homeschools, and they had a crowded living room that was living room, family room, and homeschool. They created a basement like thing about this size and like fold out desks or whatever. Felt like a dungeon. It was really creepy, actually. I didn't like it. But Andy and I were like, I bet you like this family with a ton of kids and that's pretty conservative Christian vibing, we're like, I bet you that they're using similar type curriculum. And IBLP, from what it sounds like, has stopped kind of doing some things, but they're still pushing their curriculum out into the world. And so all that to say, like, I bet you that philosophy of what they're teaching is way more it's got its some might say its claws into different parts of culture in ways that you wouldn't maybe imagine.
I totally believe that. And I saw it on TikTok, and I don't have a lot to back this up, but it was just a name I recognized, and I didn't recognize the name Bill Gothard. Is someone was saying, like, we're talking about Bill Gothard, but we also need to talk about James Dobson, who had very similar views.
Yeah,
and
Focus on the Family Guy.
Focus on the Family Guy. He wrote a book called Bringing Up Boys. I don't know a lot about like what he has to say, but I know that like that was a more common household name when I grew up, and they were like, he's pretty similar. To Bill Gothard. Yeah,
if you're like pushing back, I don't know a ton about him, but like I find Focus on the Family and that kind of stuff pretty problematic as far as like gender roles and sexuality stuff, and so I'm not a huge fan of him. But when I was a youth in middle and high school, like every parent I knew was like Focused on the Family. Like that was what they listened to because they were like, we need to help our kids. Like it was the main parental podcast of its time. I don't know if we call it a podcast.
Yeah. Last thing I want to say, I didn't know the story of how Michelle and Jim Bob met. And I low-key felt kind of bad for Michelle because she was just vibing in high school, being a cheerleader. And then Jim Bob was like, you need to like cover your knees and like all that. And she was like, you're so right, King. And then married him.
Yeah.
Like that's just wild to me.
I think it's wild. I think it was weird. But it also made me wonder, like, if you're programmed to think that you're just like waiting for the man to come and find you and save you and give you completeness and wholeness.
But she wasn't.
She wasn't that. Oh, she was like a cheerleader, right? Like
she was just a normal girl.
She was like normal, yeah.
That's what was wild to me.
That is interesting then.
Because
also like what's so compelling about him to like pretty much sacrifice your life to get into that is interesting.
Couldn't tell you. But they said that about Anna, Josh's wife, is they said she was programmed to think that like my job is, she was groomed to be Josh's wife. And so they're like, even though he is like in jail for child pornography, she's still with him because one, she probably doesn't have the tools to do anything else, and that's what she learned her whole life was her purpose.
Yeah. Well, so and we can be done with this, but that's what I thought was the most problematic about all of it. It's like and these kids are now your age, older, a little younger maybe, but like they have been brought up in this thing that like did not teach them a lot of real skills academically, was very centric around a religious ideal. And so you imagine specifically for the women, people that were raised up, taught to only be subservient to their husbands with very few real skills and real knowledge, so that if you ever decide you want to leave, you have no feet to stand on, which is the ultimate way to keep people in it, right?
And maybe that answers our first question, was why did only Jill speak out? It's because none of them are actually being equipped to, and I guess who's gonna like equip their kid to leave their faith system? But I feel like again, it's just not that dissimilar to deconstruction of any kind, because it's like you don't feel equipped to navigate the world any other way.
Right. But if you were going to equip your kid to not leave, what would you not give them? Critical thinking skills. And that's what, in a really gross 100%. Overgeneralization, you would do. And I think in terms of this IBLP stuff, but also not all and we give conservative evangelicalism a bad rap in some way. Like it's not as bad as we often paint the picture, but hyper conservative critical thinking is not accepted. And I think that's what, like, if you're going to try to keep people in it, take away the thing that's our biggest weapon against us, which is asking questions, thinking critically, and challenging. What is that umbrella? It's the removal of all challenge and questions upward in the system. You can't question your parents, but your mom, who's the next one. But your mom can't question your dad.
Right.
And your dad can't question Bill Gothard. And he can't question God.
So you're trapped.
And no one can question the Deconstruction Zone podcast.
We should make a new umbrella chart. The Deconstruction Zone, pastors, comedians.
Dustin, if you have like some free time and you want to make a comic umbrella for us, it'd be pretty funny actually.
Or very heretical. Someone could pop that out and be like, this is what they're teaching.
Yeah. I think I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think that's kind of all I wanted to say. I just wanted to touch base about that documentary because it was kind of definitely part of the zeitgeist.
It was the cultural zeitgeist.
I think it was in like the Christian cultural zeitgeist. Like, I don't know if a lot of like atheists. No, I know some.
I think a lot
were.
of people watched it.
I think it was a pretty big deal
because people knew them.
That's true.
I knew of them. I didn't know they were Christian. I just like these weirdos have a ton of kids.
Oh, interesting.
So I think there's more people maybe in my camp that are like, I've heard of it, but I don't know much about them.
And their wives made them watch it. I'm kidding.
Yeah. I think you were the first one to tell me about it, actually.
So Dustin was the first one to tell me about it.
The umbrella.
The umbrella. Dustin, Emily, Danny. The true Deconstruction Zone umbrella. But speaking of being able to have critical thinking and asking questions, it's time for email corner.
Yeah. So we got YouTube. We're getting more into YouTube.
We are.
We tell people all the time, like and subscribe. We're up to 200 now. And I know we're about 30 minutes, so I want to make sure that we kind of do this quick and go through it. But
yes.
We've been getting a lot more interaction there.
Mm-hmm.
And we just put out, when this is being recorded, some shorts. The episode, we talk a little about hell in it, but in the shorts, we talk about, there's one that's about like hell and purgatory and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to unpack a comment, and I want to...
What do you have to say for yourself, Danny?
What do I have to say for myself?
Isn't this a question toward your
Well,
comment?
I'm going to give it to you a little bit, and me. But so we've talked about this before, and I think in a whole episode we should revisit this at some point. But like, I believe in a literal heaven and a literal hell. You believe in a literal heaven, not a literal hell.
Yeah.
We both agree that no one's going to hell.
Yep.
I just happen to believe that there is a literal hell that exists.
There's just a chasm, an empty chasm.
How deep the that will not get
new meaning.
That won't get as many likes as the VeggieTales song you sung. I'll tell you that.
No one wants you to sing on this podcast, Danny.
That's a fact. No one wants me to sing in church. One time really early on at the well, I forgot to turn my mic off and we're singing Reckless Love. And I just watched Sadie, like, what is this deep guttural noise coming from the speaker behind me? And it was me singing.
I love that.
But someone said, like, how can you... I gotta pull it up now. But the question is...
It was like, how can you believe in the literal hell but not think anyone's going there?
Yeah, generally. So, and I think that's really interesting. And for me... like, and I want to hear your thoughts on just how you got to where you are, because this is essentially, for me, it's like, why do I believe this? And
this is our really brief.
Yeah.
We should have recorded us hardcore fighting at the bar.
We should have. That was
about heaven and hell.
I think we should go into it. We'll do another. I really do think we should do. We actually, in the lost tapes, we have one episode that was recorded and never released on heaven and hell.
Yeah.
And so it's not out there in the world, so we should just re-record it and dive into it.
So just very brief overview.
Yeah.
We can get
So
into it.
for me, it's like, I believe very deeply in the overwhelming, loving grace of God that's going to win people over. I do. Sing it. So I do believe in that, and I believe that, like, our life here is a precursor to the eternity that we have in paradise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, though, like, I think the question I get is like, well, why even say, like, just say you don't believe in a hell if no one's going to go there, or like, why does that need to be a part of your belief? Because I do believe we all have a propensity for and an ability to move more towards evil than towards good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have friends that would say, like, evil and good are not things. It's all about intent, and I think that's absolute nonsense. I think there's evil and I think there's good. And so for me, I think that the reason that I not need a hell, because I don't need a hell, especially if I don't believe anyone's going there, right? But I believe that hell, and the literal belief in it, is my reconciling and acknowledgement of the fact that life as it exists is not always perfect, and there's always us given the opportunity to move closer to God or further away from God. And I think my understanding and belief in a hell is saying, like, I think God's love and God's grace is so compelling that eventually we'll want that and we'll accept that, and I think we'll live into that. But there's always the option to say no. And if there's an option to say no, there has to be another room to occupy. If the option to say no exists, there it is. Now, I think God is so compelling that we will eventually choose to not say no, whether that's in life, death, or post-mortem. But there has to be a choice to say no if there is a choice to say yes. Otherwise, why do, and you hate when I say this, but why do anything if
I
it's
know.
just given to you?
You know that I hate
Most
like
of the
what
things
you
I
just
said.
said. No. But this is where we definitely disagree. It's just like I struggle with seeing how it's loving to give the option of hell, like to give the option of eternal torment. Like if it, like to me it's like giving Gracie, your daughter, the opportunity to like touch a fire or like touch a cloud. Like it's like,
Yeah.
that's not helpful.
Right, but it's like if I had the opportunity, if I gave my kids the opportunity for dessert or they only ate dessert, what is more loving? Like one is not going to eventually turn out. Like if I give them the good thing all the time, they'll lose interest in how good it really is. Like, but if they have the opportunity to see it as something that is good and an aberration from what we live in all the time, like I think there's more reverence for that, right? And the incomplete analogy,
Yeah.
but I think like the idea that just because it's always available makes it more loving, I don't hear that.
I guess I'm not trying to say always available. I'm just saying like the ultimate choice.
Mm.
Also, this is where I'm like currently vibing in with Heaven and Hell. But so one of my favorite books ever is The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
Love it. Talk about it all the time. But one thing is there's like a flying bus from hell to heaven. And then they get there, they get to heaven and they're just like vibing. But it says, the guy says that the grass hurt his feet.
Yeah.
And he said something like it was too real for, like it was so real it was painful. And to me, where I'm at in my beliefs is that I think that the afterlife or eternity is one place. Ultimately, I believe that this earth is going to be renewed and restored. But so like whatever, if there's a place you go in the meantime, I don't know. But I think heaven, I think there were the new heavens and the new earth maybe won't be compelling to everyone on the first day. And so like hell is the like struggle with like I don't like that everyone's getting along or like blah blah blah. And to me, because to me that seems a lot more like a God in pursuit of restorative justice instead of a God in pursuit of retributive justice. Like I think that there's still hope for restoration post-mortem and post-apocalypse.
Sure. So some would say I'm in my question asking era. So I'm going to ask you some questions real quick.
You know I loved that.
I knew you did that. So why is that any different than what I think? Like,
no, I get what you're saying. Because so do you think people might vibe in hell for a little bit and then be like, this sucks and go to heaven?
Maybe. I'm not exactly sure. But I think that, so here's my underlying question is how is it, so say I believe that. Like, so say you could spend eternity, you could spend 10 years, 1 day, 5 minutes in hell. Or you could spend eternity in heaven, but for you, 1 minute, 10 years, 5 years, eternity feels like hell.
That's interesting.
How is one more or less loving than the other?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I just feel like I don't know why you need to give bad options to people.
That's a bad option, though. That's still a bad option.
But you're like being exposed to the good. It's like what I said at the beginning about how like ritual makes you feel some type of way.
Yeah. So I actually agree kind of with you.
I also don't find your way super problematic. So like,
yeah. So I would say like
this is for show.
This is, but this is one of the things I think like, and I love the ritual example and I love that. But the reason I was asking those questions is less a you thing and more of an all of us thing. I think when we craft our theology around hell, it's far more in the interest of serving our discomfort than it is in crafting a real theology. And it's like, I want to like avoid the things that make me uncomfortable. It's the reason people, so I believe in a hell, not because it makes me comfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't want one. But me being comfortable is not the most paramount thing to my life and faith. And so I'd rather try to reconcile why I think a completely terrible, awful thing can be a part of a good and sovereign God's plan than try to create something else. Also, caveat, most of our understandings, visuals, optics, and theology of hell are built around bad Christian literature. And not
by Dante's Inferno and not from anything Jesus said.
And not pulled from anything Jesus said. So there has to be some thing in that. And so the reason I love this question that we had, and the reason we will spend another episode, like I want to do a full episode on this. And maybe we'll throw out recommendations and emails and we'll just dive into it fully. is because I'm just always so interested in why we care so much about it and why the emotions evoked are evoked. Like, I think all of the questions around it are so much more interesting almost than the answer we get at the other side. Like, why do I feel this way about it? Why does it make me uncomfortable? All that because, and I said this we did a Q&A message and I talked about heaven and hell. I was like, I've never been there. I don't know.
Right.
It's speculation. So at the end of the day, we're all speculating. No matter how certain someone says they want to be, we're all speculating. And so for me, the most interesting thing, knowing we're speculating, is to ask why do we feel certain ways about these, and why are we asking these questions, and what does that tell me about my own life and my own faith? So,
I mean, I'm with you, and I think it reminds me of one of you and I's first conversations around Easter, where I was like, if hell doesn't exist or if people don't go there, like, why did Jesus have to die? Like, I do think if you've been raised religious, if you've been raised Christian in some form, you probably, this is a really big statement, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think if you were like raised Christian, there probably is part of you that kind of wraps your theology around hell, because I think that's what we wrap the cross around.
right.
Is we say, like, that's why Jesus died, is so that you don't go to hell. And so it's really hard to separate those, or to be like, this maybe isn't an essential theology. Yeah. Not that that's what you're saying, but it's just like, it evokes such an emotion because it is the thing that makes you stick with Jesus for most of your life.
Yeah. And I do think Jesus' life and death and resurrection are all tied to a theology of the afterlife. Like, there is this connection to it, but I do think there's interesting things to dissect in what you're saying. Is it or should it be married to a really kind of harmful view of hell that we've been fed? Like, that's not necessarily, but I do think it has to be congruent with the afterlife, and I think there's no disagreement with you and I
for sure,
because we're like whether you believe in literal hell or not, like, there is a heaven that we're both talking about. So this idea of his connection to that is really interesting, but the idea of hell, I think, like, we spend a lot of time talking about hell. People are like, heaven's great, but people really want to get into the hell question because, well, I don't know why. We'll talk about that in the next episode when we talk about it, I guess.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. That might be an interesting one for a guest, actually. Like, someone who's really, like, people across the spectrum of, like, differing beliefs. Like, some real hardcore.
Like a panel?
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. Like,
it could be interesting, but I also want people to see us fight. I don't know if we'd fight these days, though. Probably a little.
I think we might fight.
Fight. Okay. Last section.
You just need a few beers in you to get a little more sassy.
It's a little too true. When you see some beers on this table, you'll know Emily's ready to fight.
Yeah, you'll know it's the hell episode when it starts with 6 stags lined up across the table.
The devil's number.
That's funny.
You want to get into their recommendation zone? Recommendation zone.
So, absolutely not, because I don't have any.
Oh, I have one to talk about.
Okay.
So, well, yours can be Shiny Happy People. Go watch it if you haven't.
Go watch it. I might have one. On my way here, I had like 5 things I want to recommend, and they've all left my mind. I
always do that. I recently watched season 2 of Human Resources. Do you watch that show?
No, never heard of it.
It's the spinoff of Big Mouth.
Oh.
So it's like...
I've not watched Big Mouth either, but I know Big Mouth.
I love Big Mouth. So it's like... So in Big Mouth, there's like the hormone monster and the anxiety fly and like all these different creatures that are kind of like affecting these kids as they're going through puberty. And basically Human Resources is the spinoff where it's like all of those characters in the office like navigating with each other. I find it really deep, and I think Big Mouth is like one of the most profound shows ever, and I stand by that. And I think Human Resources just kind of like almost like ups the ante in that, because I don't know, it's just like I find it very funny and like goofy, but also really deep and emotional. Like there's this one part, I'm actually not gonna say that. But basically the whole season, this is season 2, was kind of like the choice between love and hate, and how like hate feels really good, but like what does it really do for you? And it just, I know that sounds so basic and corny, but it was really beautiful. I'm about it.
Yeah, well, it resonates even if it's basic and corny, because it's something we all struggle with, right? Like,
oof. Yeah. I would say, I'm not sure I would recommend it if you haven't seen Big Mouth. It'd probably be fine. It would be fine, but I don't think it would have the same effect, maybe. No, you could probably watch it on your own.
Interesting. Well, maybe I'll start it. This
Athletic.
Athletic Brewing. That's my recommendation. Athletic Brewing. If you're into non-alcoholic beer, which I am, 94 days, something like that, without a drink. So
Are we gonna do a party for your 100 and
Annie,
get trashed?
Annie really
kidding.
wants to do a party for my 100 because she's like, because I don't really talk about it. Like, I don't even, have I ever talked about it on here?
You have, because you talked about Baby J and how, like, I think you just said you were wrestling with substances.
Yeah. So it's like 94, 95 days without a drink right now. And Annie like really wants to do a 100-day thing. And we go back and forth because she's like, I want to celebrate you. I also don't want to make it seem like you couldn't like have done it. And also like, I don't want to like make it a bigger deal than it. And for me, it's like, I just like don't talk about it at the time. It's like the first 2 weeks were weird because I hang out with a lot of people and I drink with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, why aren't you drinking? And now it's 3 months and some change later. And it's like not a big deal. Like people rewrite the rhythms and they figure it out. But Athletic Brewing's really great. Maybe the next time we meet, I'll be 100 days and we'll talk about that.
That's really exciting, dude. And I'm really proud of you.
Thank you.
Not that like, I totally believed in you, but I know that was like, even though you didn't talk about it, I do know that was like somewhat of a decent journey for you. Like pretty big, thoughtful journey.
There are interesting things to consider as far as rhythms, right? And so even like you had a whiskey in the last episode we recorded.
Yeah.
I remember one of the first episodes we came, I could like smell everyone's alcohol because I was like, and you make things a bigger deal, right? When you stop them. And I like was thinking like we would always have like a drink when we would do this, or I would always have a drink in this setting. And so it's those sorts of things that have been really interesting, but it's a really great like lifestyle oil change. And I said this like a lot, like I don't know that I will not do it forever, but I also at this point, and I hate saying things because if I do, then people be like, oh, you went back on his word, but I don't see an interest in drinking again at this point. But I also don't know that I won't, because I do. And this, for anyone that struggles with substance abuse or is sober, I would stop watching now. I'm way less fun sober. Like I'm a lot more fun when I drink. I think I'm a lot less fun hang as someone that doesn't drink.
Yeah.
But I think that's also based in some ways like the expectations of what I think it means to be fun.
You're not that fun either way.
I'm not that fun either way. So that's my recommendation. I will say I have an anti-recommendation. I'm a big Tom Segura fan.
I haven't seen it.
I didn't like it. I thought it wasn't good. I thought it was. I think he is funny. I think some of his jokes were relatable. Especially as a dad, he had a lot of like funny dad jokes, things that I've said, and I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like at least I like know something that's kind of funny.
Right.
But it seemed to me, Tom, if you listen to the pod, please don't take offenses. And I would actually, you seem really fun. I would love to be your friend.
We're here to announce Tom Segura is deconstructing.
Yeah. I thought it appeared lazy. It seemed like his least funny work and it seemed like a guy that was at the top of his game, that was pumping out jokes I felt like he was resting on his celebrity and who he was and inside jokes. And I hate when comedians jokes are based on their podcast audience or other. I just think it's not funny. Even if I'm a part of the group, I'm like, oh, I laugh because that's funny. It's like, I always think about the person that's first time seeing them. It's like, that's not funny to me. So lazy. I think he's interesting. I thought he had really good jokes in there, but as a special, I never thought I would turn one of his off 2/3 the way through it. And so maybe the last third is really good. And I was just like, I wasn't that into it.
Okay, I'm going to try to watch it. Maybe I'll also watch the Hot Ones thing before, because I do want to talk about Tom Segura's special because I saw that it was coming out.
Yeah. And again, there's really funny jokes in it, but as a whole, like it just didn't, I was like,
it doesn't land.
I've been re-listening to his back catalog, his early stuff, and I think early comedians are funnier because they're edgier and they're grinding, and there's something about it that's really funny.
Yeah.
I find myself listening to people's old stuff way more than their new stuff.
I'm with you. What do you think about Matt Rife?
The podcast I was just on was talking about him. Okay. He's the guy that like really pretty boy that's like
he just sold like a world tour.
Yeah, I only see his crowd work, and I think it's kind of funny, but I always get nervous when people's work is mostly crowd work. That's because they don't have real jokes.
I'm with you. I think I haven't seen that many clips of him. Like when I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, cool. I'm not like, just like losing my mind over it. But one thing that I'm liking is I feel like Matt Rife is bringing stand-up comedy into more mainstream culture. I think it somewhat was, but I think it's still kind of viewed as like a niche, like I'm into stand-up. And now I feel like he's just like, everyone's into Matt Rife. And I think there's something cool about that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. So I'm watching this. I'm an NBA fan, and all of the players I grew up on are in their 15th ish years, all close to retirement. And there's this new young crop of people that are on the precipice of being wonderful, but it's not quite their league yet. I feel very similarly with comedy. Like, it's new people and a younger generation that are like doing it in different ways, that are bringing people in, that are like think about all the comedians. Like, there's not a lot of like people in their early 30s or 20s, and these guys are that, and girls are that, and I think that's good for comedy, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the TikTok comedy generation of like, that's how you get followers and viewers now. People aren't going to comedy clubs and just like to see someone they've never heard of. They're going to see someone who they've seen clips on TikTok and think is funny, and that is the ultimate culture shift of comedy. That's
interesting. Well, I remember approximately 20 minutes ago, I said we're at 30 minutes and we should wind this down, and we just hit 50 minutes.
Oh, man. So okay, let's wrap it up
let's wrap this up. So
good talk, though.
I thought it was really interesting. And I would say we've done now 3 out of our last 4 episodes. Actually, 4. We've had really long ones in a row. And I think not been typically our vibe, but it's good. It means we have things to talk about. So I hope listeners, like, if you like it, let us know. We can always make things shorter. And always make them longer.
I do want to like respect people's time, I say as I'm still talking on this episode, but like I know that a lot of people really appreciate the 30 minutes, but also sometimes it feels weird to just like cut a conversation down the middle if we still have more to say. So yeah, I mean, let us know in the comments if you're mad at us, I guess. Or we're probably going to hell.
Yeah, Dustin, let us know on your burner accounts.
All right, well, everybody, thanks for listening, and as always, embrace the journey. We got that one.
You know what's funny to think about is